I guess you're going to be familiar with this place wherever you live in the world. We live under that little red dot on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia. We recently spent a number of weeks on a photographic trip through the states of New South Wales and Victoria. So come with us on a journey into photography with the emphasis on capturing and presenting the best images we can from every location we visit. Our first place to visit was Nambucca Heads in New South Wales, a delightful place full of photographic opportunities. Nambucca is actually an Aboriginal word meaning entrance to the waters. A good time for landscape or seascape photography is around dawn and dusk. This is Shelley Beach, Nambucca at dawn. Some of the best light is going to be available before the sun rises. So for any dawn photography, you're going to have to arrive in the dark. So remember to take a torch and a tripod. This is Lake Macquarie, Australia's largest coastal saltwater lagoon, and it's actually twice the size of Sydney Harbour, and that's pretty big. The nature of photography is such that colour is not always as attractive as we would like. So in that case, why not consider a black and white? This image is infrared, but it's not entirely obvious at first sight because it doesn't display the obvious infrared characteristics. It was shot with a converted Canon 5D Mark II SLR. Our journey into photography took us onwards to Bateman's Bay. Captain James Cook first sighted and named the bay, but he gave no real reason for the name. Use those wide-angle lenses and try to include something in the foreground to provide depth to your image. This creates the impression that we're looking into a scene rather than at a flat picture. Once the sun sets, I've seen many photographers pack up and leave, but that's a big mistake. The colour and contrast continues to change, and often the images you capture well after sunset can often be your best. But of course, you're going to need that tripod. At this time of the day, slow shutter speeds to allow movement in the water are easy to achieve too. Our next photographic stop was in Eden, and we're still within New South Wales. Eden grew in the 1850s following the discovery of gold nearby. One evening we discovered a lookout, but the entrance looked just like a private driveway. We were reluctant to turn in, but when we did, it opened up to a beautiful lookout. One of the most difficult parts of landscape and seascape photography is being at the right place at the right time. But it certainly helps when a sailing boat tacks up and down the bay in front of the setting sun. I also captured some nice infrared shots at this location, and you may have seen some of them in an audiovisual called Living on the Edge. Our next stop was Lakes Entrance in the state of Victoria. You can pretty much guess where this historic name came from. Lakes Entrance is a beautiful place, but apart from one evening, the quality of light and weather was not always on our side. But when visible light comes up just a little bit short, that's when we can reach for the invisible light of infrared. At this stage of our journey, we ventured away from the coast over the Alpine Way to Pachuca. The Alpine Way is where Australians come to ski in the winter. Taking photographs through the middle of the day during the journey means we're faced with high contrast light. In those conditions, we have to do the best we can. High contrast light is handled much better with infrared. Pachuca is on the Great Murray River, and the Aboriginal name means meeting of the waters. This is a tourist area, so it can be difficult to isolate interesting subjects, and we sometimes have to take another tack. Here we use topaz impression filters and a little Photoshop work to create something a little different. Onwards to the Mornington Peninsula, just south of Melbourne, and you can't miss a visit to the William Ricketts Sanctuary, Aboriginal sculptures set in a natural woodland setting. Choose an overcast day for best light and take a tripod, you'll need it. Our next photographic stop was Ayers Inlet, but of course throughout our photographic journey we capture images on the way. Ayers Inlet is the gateway to the Great Ocean Road, famous for its rock formations created by the constant erosion of the limestone cliffs over 15 million years. It's the stormy Southern Ocean and blasting winds which has caused this erosion, but it does give us our photographic interest. Many amateur photographers wait for nice weather to venture out, but a stormy day can offer far more in both light quality and also drama. But exposure can be a little tricky at times, so bracketing is always good policy. The Great Ocean Road provides plenty of photographic interest, but we also made sure we were there for the low evening light and the limestone cliffs lit up in the Southern Ocean. Still on the Great Ocean Road, we headed for Port Ferry, and what a great name for a town. Portland was the next stage of our journey into photography, but it wasn't quite so obliging as other places from a photographic point of view. But the Southern Ocean swell, that was impressive. It was an extremely hot day heading inland towards Hall's Gap in the Grampian Mountains. These are a few of the scenes that greeted us on the drive to Hall's Gap. Once into our accommodation right below Falls Gap, we had some visitors. Firstly, the kookaburras, a large bold bird and not too difficult to photograph. The trick is to get in close and wait for that evening light. A little chicken mince will have them eating out of your hand. Then later, the sulphur-crested cockatoos. Sunflower seeds are their favourite. A large white parrot, so once again, lower contrast light is what we need. And we had some good light for the infrared photography too. Heading back towards Melbourne, Ballarat is a great photographic spot, an area famous for the amount of gold that was discovered there. There are lots of photographs to be found at Sovereign Hill, an open-air museum. It's situated in the early gold digging area. Living history, and it allows us to get creative with our images. We then headed for Albury for an overnight stay, and once again we were shooting in the brightest parts of the day. A polarising filter often helps. It makes you wonder how these huge granite boulders got into the landscape, probably due to an ice age millions of years ago. Here we're on the outskirts of Canberra. Good golden hour photography is not all about colour, of course. Colour is generally not enough on its own to make a great image. The light and the scene being photographed must have interest, even without the vibrant colour. The colour is just a bonus that comes with the quality of the light. Next stop is the Blue Mountains, a rugged region of West Sydney known for dramatic scenery. Steep cliffs, eucalyptus forests, waterfalls, and lots of villages too. Echo Point and the Three Sisters is probably the most well-known tourist spot. Once again, our best photography was done at dawn and dusk. Not only do we get the best light, but we dodge most of the tourists too. The bird life also showed itself while we were at the Blue Mountains, and this is a wattle bird. But we did have a technical problem here. The quality of the light for the birds was really good. The quantity of the light, given we was in the rainforest, was not so good. We had to use a 1600 ISO from a tripod just to achieve a 60th of a second shutter speed. It's not our camera movement that is the problem, it's the quick movements of the birds and the shallow depth of field. This is an eastern keel, and in these conditions the tricks are: focus carefully on the eye of the bird, shoot loads of images because many of them are going to be unsharp, and with high ISO never underexpose images at all. Fausta, which is back on the coast, has some great rocky beaches full of character, and even the rocks themselves can provide great images. Just push the colour a bit and the contrast to good effect. Stormy weather in the area had whipped up the seas a little more than usual, but it's that evening light that adds that special something. I'm on the east coast here and the sun is setting behind me. Now when conditions are in your favour, with changeable weather and a high sea, you just have to get up before sunrise and capture the dawn, especially if you're on the east coast. Be careful though, the ocean doesn't take prisoners. I ventured down onto the flat sand when it was still quite dark, but a wave forced me to grab the tripod and run up a grassy bank. Looking back, the water would have been up to my thighs, and I had all of my gear on my back in a rucksack, but it was all worth it. Moving on to Rulega, a very difficult name to pronounce with the L coming before the G at the end. The weather and light wasn't perfect, but I resisted the urge to put my feet up with a beer or two, and I went up to the headland at dusk. The light and sky changes quickly in the evening, and photo opportunities often arise when you least expect them. Notice the bird of prey hovering almost stationary here. If only I'd taken my 400mm lens with me on that walk. The butcherbird is from the kookaburra family, and once again the key is quality of light and good photographic technique. Getting closer to home, we stopped at Lennox Heads for a couple of nights, but it rained constantly. Well, what better conditions are there for some rainforest photography? Although it's difficult to keep dry while juggling a camera, a tripod and an umbrella. So overall we covered around 7,500 kilometres on our 7-week journey into photography. The photo secrets for me, if you can call them that, is to use a tripod where possible, and often it's essential of course. A tripod opens up the full range of shutter speeds and apertures to us, and we need them a lot of the time. Bracketing of exposures to ensure that when we get home there are no disappointments due to an exposure error we never spotted at the time. Those errors always occur on the best images, have you noticed that? For me, bracketing the exposures at dawn and dusk allows me to work faster, and it gives me time to capture a variety of different viewpoints because that fleeting light doesn't always last that long. Bracketing is also how I control high contrast. It allows me not to have to buy, carry or mess around with any graduated filters at all. In fact, I don't own any. I can use more than one exposure in my final image, taking the best parts of each, the basis of many of my Photoshop tutorials. But the most important aspect of capturing great images is you have to be out there. Harder working photographers just seem luckier somehow.